This is a review for a test on 5.1 to 5.3. Day 1 is focusing on the quadratic functions in standard form, factored form, and vertex form. You will not need to write anything down on this slide. Here are some of the topics for our test. We're going to have you graph quadratic equations, making sure you know how to find the vertex, the x of symmetry, the y-intercept, and the x-intercepts. When you graph lines, absolute value equations and systems, solving and graphing inequalities, and then graphing absolute value inequalities. Let's move on to the next slide. This should be a review problem for you. So I would say you don't need to write this one down, just kind of follow along. We're going to graph this quadratic equation in standard form. When you graph in standard form, you want to identify the A, B, and C. Remember, the A is the leading coefficient. So that's 1. The B is the coefficient in front of the x term. And then the C is the constant. Then remember, the degree of this parabola is going to be what we call a u. And then, or the degree is, 2, which is x squared, and then the shape is a u. Now remember from one of our earlier slides, if my leading coefficient is a positive, which it is, it's going to open up. If it's a negative, it's going to open down. Now remember, since my graph opens up, it's going to have a minimum point, which we call our critical point right there. So it's going to have a minimum point. Now we're set to find out the x of symmetry and then the vertex. To find the x of symmetry, we had a formula that we used. X equals negative b over 2a. So we're going to go ahead and use our a and b from up above. So our b is 5, so it's negative 5, over 2 times 1. So we get negative 2.5. So our equation for absolute value is x equals negative 2.5. Now we're going to find our vertex point. Remember, our vertex falls on the x of symmetry. So our vertex x value is negative 2.5. To find the y value, we substitute x into the equation. So our equation is y equals x squared plus 5x minus 14. So now we're going to substitute that negative 2.5 in. So y equals negative 2.5 squared plus 5 times negative 2.5, and then minus 14. So negative 2.5 times negative 2.5 is 6.25. And then negative 2.5 times 5 is negative 12.5, and then minus 14. Now we go ahead and combine those three terms together. 6.25 minus 12.5 minus 14 is negative 20.25. Now we can go ahead and identify that as the y value. The last thing is to find the x-intercepts. This is the new thing for you. Remember the zero product property from right after we finished factoring? You would factor this quadratic equation, solve for x, and those will be your two x-intercepts. So right now, our equation looks like this. Y equals x squared plus 5x minus 14. We're going to factor this equation. So we're going to set the equation equal to 0 and factor it. Well, the method of factoring in this is the t-chart. We say, what are the factors of negative 14 that add to 5? Well, that is x plus 7, x minus 2. So we've just used the t-chart to factor this trinomial. Now we set the factors equal to 0 and solve for x. That's the zero product property. So we say x plus 7 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. So x equals negative 7, x equals 2. These are where the x-intercepts will be. So we say negative 7, 0, and 2, 0. The last thing before graphing is to find the y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is the c of the equation. So if we go up to the original equation, remember the c? We identified it as negative 14. So our y-intercept is negative 14. So at 0, negative 14. Now we're set to put all the pieces onto our graph. So I'm going to change my x and y axes by 2. So I'll just work backwards. Let's graph the y-intercept first. So remember, the y-intercept is on the y-axis, and I'm going to go down to 14. So remember, this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. And we identify that point. Now our x-intercepts. Our x-intercepts were negative 7 and 2. So remember, they go on the x-axis. I'm going to go by 2 again. So this represents over 2. So we're over 2 up 0. Then we're going to go negative 7. So 2, 4, 6. Well, halfway would be about here. There is negative 7, 0. If we move up, our vertex is negative 2.5, negative 20.25. So we're going to go negative 2.5 on the x-axis, and then down negative 20.25. So that's about here. We're a little bit off the graph. So that is our minimum point. Now we can go ahead and graph our parabola. This is our vertex, our y-intercept, x-intercept, x-intercept. And remember, that axis of symmetry runs through the vertex. I'm going to stop the lesson there. We're at about 8 minutes.